everybody, welcome and thank you for joining us here at Wine Bob. Today we're going to be doing a tasting of the Jean-Jacques Aucher Sancerre, which is a paired tasting that we're continuing later in the week with the Kim Crawford Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc. We're doing this to do a compare and contrast between New World and Old World wines to kind of show what's being highlighted between these two styles. In the Old World, as we discussed in our previous episode, you're going to be getting leaner styles that are highlighted a little bit more by their minerality, by herbaceousness, by their floral components. They kind of take some of those fruit components and put them a little bit less in focus, and you get a little bit more of that terroir-driven style. In the New World, you're getting bolder styles, slightly richer and riper profiles that are highlighted primarily by their fruit characteristics. And the nice thing about doing these two Sauvignon Blancs side by side is I think they really do highlight that contrast. Before we jump into this tasting, I think it's important to do a quick review of some of the tasting exercises that we've done in the previous videos, primarily the ones on structure. So just a quick review. Structure is comprised of acid, sugar, tannin, and alcohol. And then also would like to refresh your memory on the flavor profiles, starting with the fruit profiles. In a white wine, we could be looking at anything from tree fruits like apples and pears to citrus fruits like grapefruit, lemons, limes, oranges. We'll also look at stone fruits like peaches or nectarines, and then tropical fruits such as pineapple, kiwi, papaya, and anything in that nature. Then we will be focusing on non-fruit flavors such as the floral components, the herbaceousness, the spiciness, as well as like any tar balsamic characteristics. Then we'll be highlighting the earth components, both organic and inorganic earth components. And then finally, we'll be focusing on whether or not there's any oak that's showing itself in the wine as well. Before we get started, let's take a trip to Sancerre. In France, there is a river that flows north from the Massif Central to Orleans, and then tends west where it meets the Atlantic Ocean just west of Nantes. This is the Loire River, and its valley is home to a many number of vineyards and regions that produce a multitude of wine styles, from Melon de Bourgogne near the coast to Chenin Blanc and Cab Franc in the Saumur and Touraine regions, and finally Sauvignon Blanc and Pinot Noir in the Upper Loire, most notably in Sancerre, and its sister across the river, Pouilly. The appellation Sancerre covers several communes of production, but one, Bue, is home to the domain responsible for the Sancerre we will be tasting. Now, unfortunately, there wasn't a ton of information out there on the wine that we're going to be tasting today. Part of the reason for that was actually the website that is associated with this wine closed down because of the pandemic. So if you actually do go to the website, it says, due to COVID-19, this website's closed. So it's not just, the brick and mortar buildings that are closing, it's actually some of the internet sites as well. But this should still follow a very similar profile to a lot of other Sancerres that you can get in the region. One thing to note is that the price point on this Sancerre is somewhere in the ballpark of about $11 to $15. And as you get more higher into those price points in Sancerre, you can expect possibly some semblance of oak. They'll do something that's called bottonage, which is lees stirring. Lees are dead yeast cells that they just kind of leave on the bottom of the fermentation vessels, and they'll stir them up to give them a richer profile, richer texture. And the way that that kind of blends into the final product is that it gives it this kind of bread dough biscuity characteristic, which is very, very pleasant, especially as it plays into the really vibrant fruit profile that Sauvignon Blanc can tend to have. So it's just something to keep in mind, is that the profile that you're getting in this wine, although it may be very similar to other Sancerres at different price points, what you're going to be getting in those higher price points is you may be getting neutral oak treatment. You may be getting some of this lees stirring, which is just going to add to the complexity of the wine. So without wasting too much more of your time, I'm going to go ahead and jump into this wine. On the nose, I get this green grass. I get a little bit of this kind of like wet forest floor characteristic that's almost a little bit musty, um, kind of dusty, almost like river rock. Lemon and lime skin, but a little bit on the leaner side. White peaches. I do get some of that lees contact. I get some of that doughy biscuit breadiness, which is kind of nice. I really like that in this wine. Little underripe pineapple. Some white grapefruit. It has this pungentness about it, almost like freshly mowed grass, but that is not unusual for Sancerre. Sancerre can tend to have this very pungent characteristic about it. I'm going to start with the structure. The acidity on this wine, it's actually not as vibrant as I was expecting it to be. Usually you have a very pronounced vibrancy on Sancerre, and it's definitely there. I'm definitely salivating, but it's just not quite as high as I'd like it to be. The fruit on the wine seems a little on the riper side considering where the acid is, and it just kind of falls a little bit out of balance. But I mean, it's still very pleasant. What the vibrancy that is there definitely holds it up well enough that it's very drinkable. The wine is completely dry, so there is no sweetness to this wine whatsoever. No even light residual sugar that would add or lend a lushness to the fruit profile. So it even presents on the leaner side, even though, like I was saying, it has a ripeness to it, that the acidity is not quite there to hold up quite as much. But the acid that is there, along with the dryness and crispness of this wine, presents very, very sharp and austere. Finally, the alcohol is moderate. It's not overpowering. This is definitely like a summery type wine. It is vibrant enough that, on a nice, beautiful mid-70s day where there's a nice, cool, slightly warm breeze blowing through, this would just be such a lovely wine to enjoy out on the deck while you're watching the kids or whatever. As far as the fruit is concerned, you're still getting a lot of those more tart fruit characteristics like lime, but as far as the lime is concerned, I'm getting a little bit more of this like pithy bitterness, when that pith is that white layer right underneath the skin, which tends to present with a little bit of bitterness. I'm also getting white grapefruit on this, which again is a fruit that can be fairly pungent in character. I get the freshly mowed grass. It has this flintiness to it, which I actually think is quite pretty. In addition to that leanness and the subtle fruit characteristic of the fruit that is there, the minerality, the lees treatment, the lack of oak on it, and the general vibrancy of it and the acidity that is present, I don't think it's mistakable. I don't think it's possible that you can mistake this for a New World wine. I think that this is a pretty decent example for the price point of what you would consider to be an old world wine. And you'll see when we go into the Kim Crawford, it's going to be presenting with a lot of these really lush fruit characteristics that Sancerre just generally does not have. When you talk about fruit on an old world Sauvignon Blanc, usually it's in a much more subtle characteristic, and I think that this is a great expression of that. At the price point, I would definitely buy this again. Like I said, this is something that I could just enjoy on a nice hot day, and all things considered, I think it's actually a pretty solid expression of what Sancerre can tend to be. I hope in some way that this kind of helped you understand to some degree what an old world wine can present as, If you have any questions, or if you would like to share your tasting notes with me, if you did happen to taste this as well, go ahead and place those in the comments, or send me a message in Messenger, or you're more than welcome to send me an email as well, and I would love to share your tasting notes with you. If you weren't able to purchase this on Sancerre and maybe you just enjoyed something else, go ahead and let me know in the comments what you were able to enjoy with us, because I would be more than happy to hear about that as well. If you get the opportunity, it would be a huge help if you subscribe to my YouTube channel, or if you're not comfortable with that, if you could share my videos with your friends on Facebook or on Instagram. It makes a huge help in the long run, and it really helps me continue to justify week to week putting out additional content for you guys. If there's anything that was left unanswered, or anything that you would like presented, or even if you just have suggestions about wines that you would like looked at, please feel free to leave those in the comments as well. The Kim Crawford that we'll be addressing next week, or sorry, later in the week, was actually a suggestion from somebody on Instagram. So I will take your suggestions very seriously, and hopefully it's going to help build and develop and shape the content that we put out on Wine Bob. In any case, stay safe, and I look forward to tasting you again later in the week. Cheers.